Hey guys, Phil here, hope you're all well. What you're looking at in front of you is my fully working MK.2 SEGA Saturn. Now, what I want to do today to this Saturn is carry out a couple of mods that I've been planning to do for a long while, but I've put it off. Now, before I mention those mods, I'll tell you what this Saturn has in it. It already has a switchless region mod installed into this Saturn, and it also has a ModChip installed into this Saturn. But there's two things I want to do. The first is the FRAM mod, so I can store my saves without the battery backup that goes in the back. And the second thing is to truly make this region free by installing a region free BIOS. So if you stick around, I'll crack on with that. Now, what I want to quickly do is show you one of the problems that you can run into when you've got a SEGA Saturn that is mod chipped. Now, unlike the PlayStation, the mod chip in the SEGA Saturn cannot spoof the region of the disc. So the disc is locked out to the region of the Saturn. So what I basically mean by that is, if I put a PAL game into this PAL Saturn, it will work perfectly fine. But if I put a NTSC US game into this Saturn, it will just flat out refuse to boot it, even though the Saturn is mod chipped. So there's a difference between the PlayStation mod chip and the SEGA Saturn mod chip. The SEGA Saturn mod chip, all it really does is authenticate the disc. It doesn't change the region of the disc, or better yet, spoof the region of the disc, and I'll show you that. So I've got here a backup of Resident Evil, and obviously this is a switchless region Saturn, but at the moment I've got it in power mode, which is green, and you'll see when I power it on, it flashes green. I'm going to shut the lid, I'm going to power it on, and you can see it's green. And watch what happens. Even though this is mod chipped, it will not boot the disc. And there we go, you can see, look, game disc unsuitable for this system. And that's because the mod chip authenticates the disc, but it doesn't spoof the region of the disc. So what I'll do now is I'll change the region to US, so when I get to orange, let go. Now the region is US. Best thing to do is power off and power on if you want the disc to boot, because the mod chip's a little bit flaky. But you'll see now, watch what happens. There we go, it boots the disc. And again, what I'll do is I'll change the region to Japanese. So that's Japanese now, it's red, solid red. So if I power off, I power on the console, you'll see again the disc will not boot. And there we go. So the mod chip, all it basically does in the Saturn is authenticate the disc. It doesn't spoof the region, and that's the reason why I want to install the region free BIOS, because it doesn't matter what region I'm in, the game will simply boot. So just before I get into this and install the region free BIOS, I just want to mention that there are ways around that region problem. And the first one is very, very simple. You take your game disc, you make an ISO, and then you can take a program like SEGA Saturn Region Patcher, and you can patch the ISO to the region that the console is, and then obviously you put the game in the console mod chip authenticates the disc, and because it matches the region of the console, the game disc will boot. The second way to do that is to use an action replay, and I've got one of those, and I'll show you that working. So I've gone and got my action replay. You can see it's in the SEGA Saturn, and if I power on, you'll see I'm in Power European mode and it's booting, and it should boot to the action replay. There we go. It's booted to the action replay. Now obviously I'm going to put a backup of Resident Evil in there, and you can see it's the US version. Now to boot a backup disc you still need a ModChip. The action replay won't boot backups. Shut the lid. We should get the spin up, and I can hear it spinning up. Now if I go to start game and start game with no cheats, because we're not cheating, and there we go, you can see the action replay boots the US version of the game, even though we're in PAL mode. So that's the second way of doing it. And the third way to do it is obviously just match the region of the game with a switchless region mod. So there, I'm in America now, you can see it's orange. Shut the lid, power on, and because the game disc matches the console's region, the game should boot. And there we go. Sweet, winner. And the fourth and final way, and in my opinion the best way to play out of region SEGA Saturn discs, is to install a region free BIOS, because then in combination with the ModChip, the Saturn will go, oh, it's an original disc, I don't care what region it is, boot it, this guy wants to play games. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to install the region free BIOS. And why I'm in there removing the old SEGA Saturn BIOS and replacing it, I might as well replace the backup RAM to save your games that's in the SEGA Saturn. Now if you own a SEGA Saturn, or you know someone that owns a SEGA Saturn, they will tell you that the backup RAM that is used to save the games in the SEGA Saturn is volatile RAM. So basically what that means is it's backed up by a CR2032 that goes in the slot just here. Now the problem with that is the SEGA Saturn is notorious for eating through CR2032s. It's a battery hungry machine. And the problem with that is, let's say I take this SEGA Saturn and I store it away for 5, 6 months, 8 months, a year. When I come back to it, those saves will be gone, and the reason it will be gone is because the batteries run out, and because it's volatile RAM that needs battery to back up the contents when the system's not powered, those saves just disappear. Now this chip here is very similar to the RAM that's in the Saturn that is used for saving your games, but the great thing about this here is it's non-volatile. It doesn't need a battery to back up to save your saves. So you can store this thing away for 6, 8 months, a year even, come back to it, and your game saves are still going to be there because it's non-volatile RAM. So yeah, these are the two mods I'm going to be installing into the SEGA Saturn. The first is a region free BIOS, and the second is a non-volatile RAM upgrade. What I want to quickly do is show you how you find what version BIOS you have in your SEGA Saturn. Now there's two ways of doing it. On the Mod 1, on the boot screen, it gives you the version of the BIOS here. But on the Mark2s, it doesn't show you what version you have on the boot screen, but I'm going to show you how you find out on both Mark 1 and Mark 2s what version BIOS you have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go into the system settings. I'm going to press the button, and if we take a look in the bottom right hand corner, my version of BIOS, it's version 1.01A. Now you can ignore the A, it's basically 1.01. If you've got a 1.00, you generally see those in Mark 1 SEGA Saturns, but this is a Mark 2 and this one's got a version 1.01. Now, one thing to note, guys, is I can actually put a Japanese BIOS into this SEGA Saturn if I wanted to, but if I'm going to do that, I need to match the BIOS version. So I need to put the Japanese version of the version 1.01 into this SEGA Saturn. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly show you how you find out what version of BIOS you have, and as you can see, mine's version 1.01A. What I want to do now is talk a little bit about the two chips I'm going to replace in the Saturn, and I'm going to replace them with these two chips. Now the first one here is a flash chip. This is what's going to hold the region 3 BIOS image, and the second one is a FRAM chip, a non-volatile type of chip, which basically means you don't have to have a battery to store data. Now obviously the first one is going to be a flash chip to store the BIOS, and I'm going to use a 29F800 flash chip. Now you're supposed to use a 29F400, but I don't have a 400, I have an 800 version, and the FRAM chip I'm going to use is an FM1808 non-volatile FRAM. So yeah, they're the two chips I'm going to use to perform this mod. What I want to talk about now is the device I'm going to use to program the flash chip, the 29F800. I'm going to be using this, the X-Gen-Q, I hope I pronounced that right, Pro. It's the T56 model, and I'm going to be using my adapter, the DIP44 to SOP44 adapter. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've downloaded the SEGA Saturn Region 3 BIOSes. What I'll do is I'll put a link to this archive, this 7-zip archive, so you can download it and use the same BIOS images I'm using. Now I've actually done a lot of work in this archive that contains the BIOSes, so you don't have to, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract the files. I have WinRAR that allows me to extract 7-zip files, so I'm just going to extract the files here, and I'm going to extract them into the SEGA Saturn Region 3 BIOS folder, and there we go. That's the archive extracted. What I want to do is show you the files that are in here, the BIOS files that are in here. So if we go into emulation folder, now these BIOS files are for emulators. So if you've got like a SEGA Saturn emulator for your PC, these are the BIOS files you'll use for that emulator. So if we come out and I go into the hardware folder, now these are the ones that you use for real hardware basically, and you can see there's two folders. There's the 29F400T and the 29F800T. So let's start with the 29F400. Now all these files that are here have already been prepped. They're ready to go all you have to do is flash them, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I open up a hex editor, you can clearly see these BIOS ROM images, they've already been byte swapped, so you don't have to do any byte swapping, they're ready to go. And if you take a look, you can see these ones are half a meg, and that's the size for the 29F400T. So if you're using a 29F400T, these are the BIOS ROM images you want to flash. You just pick the one you want, you know, which matches your version of BIOS, flash it, and away you go. You don't have to do any byte swapping, anything. They're all ready to go. They just need flashing to the flash chip. Now if we go over to the 29F800T, we can see they've already been doubled up, because obviously the 29F800T is twice the size of the 29F400T. So what I've done, you can see, is I've doubled up the ROM image, so you won't have to do that. And if we go in again to one of the ROM images, if I hex edit one of the ROM images, you can clearly see, there we go, the image has been byte swapped. So again, these ones are ready to go. You don't have to do any byte swapping, you don't have to do any doubling up of the ROM images. Just choose which one you want and flash it to the flash chip. What I've done as well is I put a readme file in there as well, so if you want to pause the video and read that, I'll just leave that there for a second. It just explains what file is in what folder, and yeah, they're ready to go, guys. You don't have to do any work. All you've got to do is pick the correct chip you're using. So if you're using the 29F400T, you pick one of the ROM images in there. If you're using the 29F800T, you pick one of the ROM images in there. You don't have to do any work, just pick the one you want, flash it to the flash chip, and you're off. So what I want to do now is pick the region 3 BIOS ROM image I'm going to use, and I'm going to go into hardware folder, and obviously I'm using a 29F800T, so I'm going to go into that folder. And like I said, these are all ready to go. You don't have to do any byte swapping, you don't have to do any doubling up of the ROM images, they're just ready to go. Now if you remember, my SEGA Saturn was a version 1.01A, and if we take a look, here it is, Saturn version 1.01A. The WW stands for worldwide, and the RF obviously stands for region 3. So I'm going to cut that file, I'm going to come out and I'm going to paste that there, and I'm just going to get rid of all the other files so I don't pick the wrong one. Basically I know which one to pick, and I'm ready to flash that region 3 BIOS ROM image to the 29F800T flash chip. So I'll get set up and then I'll do that. So I'm ready to flash that SEGA Saturn region 3 BIOS to the 29F800T flash chip, and I've got my T56 programmer ready, I've got the adapter, and I've got the chip in the adapter. So the first thing I need to do is obviously select that chip. So I'm going to go to here and I'm going to write in 29F800T, and there it is, it's Macronics, and you can see we've got the TSOP version, we've got the BGA version, but obviously we're using SOP 44, so I'm going to select that. Now if you've got any reservations of how to put the chip in the adapter, if you look at the details, it will show you how to do it here. If you go to the device info tab, it will show you how to do it. I've already gone ahead and done that, and it's all set up. The first thing I want to do is make sure I can get the chip ID. That will tell me if the chip is actually in the adapter and the socket okay. So I'm going to go ID check, and the ID check is here. You can see it should be 00C2, that's right, 22D6, perfect. So we've got the chip ID, so we know it's in the adapter. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is I want to do a blank check, and I'm just going to run that, and there we go. Okay, so now we're ready to flash that SEGA Saturn region 3 BIOS. So I'm going to go to File, Load, and I'm going to click on the Browse button, and it's on my D drive, dump folder. It should be in here, and there it is, SEGA Saturn version 1.01a, worldwide region 3. I'm going to select that file. Okay. Now it's just asking me a few things. What type of file is it? We know it's a binary file, so we select binary. Now it's asking me, where do I want to put the file? Do I want to put it in the buffer, which is here, or do I want to flash it as soon as I press OK? I'm going to put it in the buffer first. Load mode, normal, clear buffer when loading the file. All that does is just make sure that the buffer is effed off before it loads the file. So I'm going to click OK, and that should have loaded the file into the buffer, and it has. And now all I have to do is program the chip. So I'm just going to go to the program button, and then I'm going to click program, and I'm going to sit back and let it do its thing. Okay, and there you go, programming successful. So I'm going to come out of there by pressing the back button. Now what I like to do, just to cover my backside, is do another verify, and all that does is just make sure that the code that's in the buffer that we loaded is the same as the code that's on the chip. So I'm going to go to the verify button here, and I'm just going to press verify, and there we go, verify result successful. So if I back out of that, all that's done is made sure, like I said, that the code here is exactly the same as the code on the chip. And that's it, we're done. We're ready to install this region 3 BIOS now into the SEGA Saturn. And it's time to get in this SEGA Saturn. So I'm gonna flip it over, get my electric screwdriver, make sure I'm in there. So, one, two, and there's always one that wants to stay in there. Final is there. Now they'll come off when I take the lid off, and there we go. And you can see my mod chip. These ones always want to stay in, they're a pain in the backside. Come on. There you go. And if you take a look at the back, you can see there's the CR2032 that is used to back up that RAM that we're going to replace. That is used to save all the internal saves. First thing that I want to take out is the mod chip. It's super easy to do. Just pull the ribbon out. I want to take off the tape. Now this is the problem with the SEGA Saturn. This is what's known as a V3 SEGA Saturn mod chip. The problem with SEGA Saturn mod chips is there's no real place to put them. You have to do this with them, and it's horrible taping it down. What I might do in a future video is see if I can make a little bracket, like 3D design and print a little bracket for it that holds the mod chip better, because you know it's just crap like that. So that's my mod chip removed. What I'm going to do next is remove the actual CD-ROM block. And to do that, it's very easy. It's not screwed in. Just remove this connector and it should just lift straight out. And also, if we take a look at the side here, we've got the grounding strap. I should have really taken that off first, but to be honest, I forgot about it. It's been a little bit of time since I've been in a SEGA Saturn, and I forgot about the grounding strap. Now, one thing to note, guys, if you take your SEGA Saturn's CD-ROM out and you forget to remove, if you forget to put the CD-ROM back on with this grounding strap, the actual CD-ROM won't work. So if you put a mod chip in, or you mod the console and you put it back together and you find out that it's not actually loading discs, you might want to check your grounding strap. Make sure that you've put it back on there. But that's the CD-ROM removed. The next thing I want to remove is the actual power board. That's very easy. There's 3 screws, if I can remember off the top of my head. There's one here, and there should be 2 at the back where the power connector plugs in. Just there, you can see them. So if I remove both of these, the power board should come out. There we go. And the final thing I need to do is remove the power on off switch connector. And if it looks familiar, it's the same one that's used in the Dreamcast. So now the power board should just lift straight off these pins just here. Look, they connect to those pins, and that's it. That's the power board removed. The next thing I want to get out before I can remove the actual shield is the actual power switch itself. Now that's super easy. There's a couple of screws. There's one just there and the one on the opposite side, and I'm just going to remove those screws, and we should be able to remove the power switch. And there's the power switch, and while I'm there, I'm going to take out the plastic flash guard. Now this is a separator slash flash guard. It stops, it has 2 purposes. It stops obviously when if a component goes nuclear and explodes, it stops flash, but it also insulates the power supply against the shield of the Saturn. So that's it. That's all the major components out. While I'm here, I'll just remove the LED light pipe. Might as well do that now while I'm here. And finally, all I've got to do is remove the metal shield. And now, because there's a lot of screws here, I'm gonna use my electric screwdriver. I'm just gonna remove the grounding strap for the CD-ROM drive. Remember, you've got to put that back or your CD-ROM drive won't work. So now I should be able to go around and just remove all the case screws that are around the shield. And I'll show you one, guys, that always gets you. It's this one here, This one will always get you. You'll be trying to get the board out and you'll be like, what's going on? Why is it not coming out? And it's that one. You forgot about it and it just does your head in. Now you've got to be careful with the SEGA Saturn, and I'll show you why. Some screws are actually, I'll show you there if you can see that. Some screws in the SEGA Saturn are actually longer, you can see there, than other ones. Now generally these longer ones go around the outside of the case. These smaller ones connect to these points here and the power switch. So you've got to be very careful, because you know, if you start putting different size screws into different size holes, you can cross thread them, you can damage the actual thread itself. You've got one here what's just spinning around. There we go, it's coming. Just grab that one with my other screwdriver. It's more magnetic. Come on. There you go. And again, you'll see these ones are longer for the actual cartridge slots. So you just got to be aware of what screw comes out of where with the SEGA Saturn, because some screws are longer than others. And that should be all the screws removed from the motherboard. So, sorry, the shield. So we should be able to lift out the shield. Now obviously you've got to be careful. There's two things you've got to be careful of. There's this connector here that goes to the CD-ROM, but you've also got the CD-ROM ribbon. Now that shield's removed, I can actually remove this from the board, and there we go, that's removed. And you can see my switchless mod, it's just under the tape here. And why I'm there, I'm going to take out the CR2032 because we won't be needing that to keep our saves anymore. Now I will mention that you will still need it to keep the time and date, but the great thing about that is that chip is not power hungry. So you put a CR2032, that will last a very long time, compared to the actual RAM chip, which eats these for fun. So take out the little bracket, and now we should be able to just lift out the SEGA Saturn motherboard, and there we go, that's the SEGA Saturn stripped down. Now we've got the SEGA Saturn motherboard out and ready to work on. I just want to show you a few things. The first is I want to show you what revision the SEGA Saturn is. And if we take a look, we can see here it's a VA9. Now VA9s generally only released in European power markets. I don't think I've ever seen a VA9 NTSC Asian or NTSC US version of the VA9. I've only seen PAL versions. Next I want to show you the area that we're going to be working, and it's just here. So I want to talk a little bit about that and the dangers of working in this area. The problem with the Saturn is it's very compact. There's not a lot of workroom. The chip spacing is pretty small, and you can see they've crammed a few chips into this area. Now if we take a look at this chip here, this is the BIOS chip that we're going to remove with hot air, and just above it here is the save RAM chip that we're going to remove with hot air. But if you look at the surrounding areas, what we have to deal with is we've got this RAM chip here, we've got this custom ASIC, we've got this little capacitor where if you heat that up too much it will explode. we've got these 2 RAM chips, and finally we've got the CD-ROM connector ribbon. So there's a very compact area that we're working on, and we have to be very, very careful that we don't accidentally damage some of the components surrounding this area when we're using our air to remove this chip and this chip. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to prep and get things ready so I can remove these chips with hot air. I'm just going to get some Captain tape and mask off the areas in this capacitor, and also get some aluminium tape and just cover the areas as well, and that will help with reflecting the heat. Okay, well, there we go. The FRAM chip removed and the BIOS chip removed, and as you can see, no lifted pads and none of the components and ICs around there have been affected. Okay, and that's the FRAM installed. Next for the BIOS chip. Okay, it's time to get this back together and give it a test. And as you can see, we're all back together. Now I just want to show you something, guys. The battery has not been put back in. If I turn it around and we take off the cover on the back of the Saturn, you can see there, I lift it up, you can see there's no battery in there to back up the save RAM, not like we need it anymore, and there's no battery there to hold the time and date. So what I'm expecting when I power this SEGA Saturn on now is to get the screen that tells us, I think we need to set the language first and then the time and date. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, let's power this SEGA Saturn on. You can see we're in power mode, and yes, there we go. So that tells me that the region 3 BIOS is working, because obviously if that wasn't working we wouldn't get anything, we just get a black screen. So it's asking me to set the language, so I'm going to select English. I'm going to exit, and I'm just going to quickly go through the time and date. I'm not really bothered about setting the time and date because there's something I really want to do first, you know, and this is very important. What I want to do is, because I've installed new FRAM into this SEGA Saturn, I want to clear, well, basically initialize that new RAM. So I'm going to go into System Settings, I'm going to go to Memory Manager, and I'm going to clear the new FRAM that's in there. Now it's important you do this, because if you don't, the system won't be able to save, because obviously it's new RAM and it needs to initialize, because all the Saturn will see is just garbage because it's a new FRAM chip that's in there. So I'm just going to do it twice just to make sure. And there we go, cleared, and that's the FRAM initialized. So I'm going to come out of that and come out of that and exit that. We should be able to exit now, and there we go, we're ready now, guys. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my action replay, because before I swap the old SRAM to FRAM in this, I copied a save over to my action replay. What I want to do is copy that back to the new FRAM that's in this system, and I'm going to leave it off an hour to see if it still stays in memory. So I'm just going to get my action replay and then I'll come back. As you can see, I've got my action replay, so let's power on the Saturn, and here we go. Because it's been off a while, it's still moaning at me because there's no battery in there. So that just proves that, you know, the Saturn's one of those consoles that really just get on your nerves if you don't set the time and date. There we go. Yeah, and we're booting the action replay. Just grab my controller. So what I want to do is I want to go down to Memory Manager. And if we take a look, so here's the system memory. You can see it's blank. We've initialized it, it's now blank. Here's the memory that's on my action replay. Now just to copy them over, I'm just going to press the C button. So I'm going to copy that one. Here we go, that's that one copied. I'm going to copy the next one as well. and that's my Resident Evil saves copied to the internal new FRAM. Now there's something you need to do here, guys. A lot of people make a mistake, is they'll turn off and then the memory won't get saved. If you read it, it goes you must exit to save changes, right? So you need to do that, and to exit, you see, press the B button, and that's it. Those saves are now been copied from my action replay into the new internal FRAM. Now I've copied those saves from my action replay to the SEGA Saturn. I just want to make sure that they're there. So I'm just going to power on the SEGA Saturn, and we're going to go have a look. And we're going to get this all the time now, guys, because it's got no battery in it. So I'm going to go English, and I'm going to exit. And again, I'm just going to skip over setting a time and date. And let the SEGA Saturn boot. And there we go, we're into the menu. So I'm going to go to System, and I'm going to go to Memory Manager, and we should see those two saves. Now you can see the remove item is not grayed out anymore. So if I go into that, I'm not going to remove them, I'm just going to show you. And there's our two saves that we copied over from the action replay cartridge. So they're still there, they're still on the SEGA Saturn. Now what I'm going to do now, just to give it the ultimate test, is I'm going to power it off. I'm going to take the power cord out the back. Obviously I'm going to power on, make sure there's no residential energy in the power supply. Power that off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this thing for half an hour, 45 minutes. Then I'm going to come back, and I want to see if those saves are still there without this battery backing up the SRAM, because obviously we got new FRAM. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it half an hour, 45 minutes, and then I'll come back. So it's been about, what, I'd say 43-ish minutes, which is long enough. That old SRAM would have lost those settings by now. So yeah, let's see if they're still there on that new FRAM. So let's power on, and oh plank. I left the power cord off, then I took the power cord out. Let's plug that back in there. Okay, that's power cord back on. Let's power on, and there we go. And yeah, there you go. It's asking me to set the language and time and date again. And that's what you get when you CR2032 is not in the back. It gets a little annoying. Okay, moment of truth. All our saves still there after 45 minutes of not being backed up. Let's go to Memory Manager and remove items, and there they are, they're still there. Winner winner, FRAM is working fantastic. Now what I'm going to do, guys, off camera, is I'm going to put the battery back in, because I'm fed up of setting the language and the time and date. Now the great thing about putting this battery back in it now is this battery will last a very long time, because obviously it's not backing up the old SRAM. All it's used for now is to remember the time and date and the language settings. So yeah, I'm just going to get that battery back in this thing. I'm going to set the time and date and the language, and then we're going to see if this can boot out of region game discs, which it should do, hopefully, fingers crossed. So what I've done off camera is I've put the battery in the back, and I've set the language and the time and date. So when I power on this thing, we shouldn't get that anymore. And there we go, we're getting a boot from the SEGA Saturn. Winner winner. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is see if this thing is truly region free. Now you can see I'm in power mode because it's green, and I'm going to put my US version, backup version of Resident Evil in there, and hopefully, unlike before where it flat out refused to start the disk, we should get the start application message, hopefully. And there we go, you can see start application. So I'm going to press the start button, and there we go, it start to load Resident Evil. So yeah, this thing is now truly region free. Now if you remember, I had a save on there when I tested the FRAM. I copied it from my action replay, and it should be ready to load, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to load that save just to prove that this thing is working. So there it is, there's my save. Now if I remember off the top of my head, this is the very start of the game, and I should have the rocket launcher because yeah, I added the cheat code with my action replay. So hopefully we start with the rocket launcher, and there it is. You can see it's Chris with his rocket launcher. Set one off, and there we go. So yeah, there you go guys, hope you liked the video. This SEGA Saturn is very nicely kitted out now. It's got a region free BIOS in it, will boot any game from anywhere. It's got an FRAM upgrade in it, you know, we don't have to worry about battery backup saves anymore. It's got a switchless region mod in it, so I can just change the region by holding the reset button down, and it's got a mod chip. So yeah, this SEGA Saturn is really nicely kitted out. Probably the only thing that it's missing now is an optical drive emulator, but to be honest, the optical pickup laser in this SEGA Saturn is working fantastic. You can see it boots backups, not a problem, and plays them, not a problem. So I'm not really worried about an optical drive emulator at the moment. But yeah, we've got a really nice Saturn now, Mark II Saturn. So yeah, I hope you liked the video guys. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff, and as always, I'll catch you on the next one. That's a winner. We've got a really nice Saturn. Get in. Catch you next time guys.